After more than 35 years, looks like the Menendez brothers will be getting out of jail. Attorney Jeremy Rosenthal with TexasDefenseFirm.com is joining me now on the Scott Sand Show. Jeremy, you and I talked about this last week, and exactly what you expected to happen is going to happen. The prosecutor, George Gascon, is referring this case back to a judge to reconsider sentencing.
Yeah, again, I'm completely right about everything. Not a surprise.
No, I'm certainly not surprised at all. But the recommendation from Gascon was somewhat of an interesting twist on this. We thought that perhaps he could have changed the charge to involuntary manslaughter, which would have been an 11-year sentence, which means they would have been released, or recommend resentencing. But he essentially changed the murder charge, and because they were both under 26 at the time of their conviction and at the time of the murders in 1989, the sentencing guidelines for their age and that charge is different.
Right. It's a bit of a punt. I mean, he is a man who is going to be standing for a life. I mean, it's not a shock between saying, look, these boys were guilty. And I'm tough on crime, and ultimately a touch of a punt because, yes, it's going to be up to a parole committee whether or not the Menendez brothers are released. So he's trying to really walk a fine line here.
Yeah, he wants to seem like he's tough on crime. He doesn't want to say that they should be out. But obviously he's caving to a lot of public pressure thanks to TikTok and the Monsters series and the documentary on Netflix and some of the other attention that the Menendez case is now receiving lately in the media. He's caving to some of that pressure. I mean, Kim Kardashian's op-ed, I thought it was very passionate and powerful. I don't know if you had a chance to read that.
I normally follow everything Kim Kardashian and the rest of the Kardashians do. When I'm not practicing law at a very high level, but I mean, look, you would also hope that the judge is just doing the right thing here, or rather that Gascon is just doing the right thing here. I mean, there's a lot of what you would call mitigating evidence, right? I mean, the fact that the Menendez brothers killed their parents is not in question, and regardless of what we think, and maybe they should be acquitted, but it seems as though if he's resentenced, if the judge makes him parole eligible, if he gets out, that we drop the innocence claims or the claims for acquittal. But yeah, in this, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to suggest that 35 years of prison was enough.
So the acquittal is an interesting point because they've not denied that they shot their parents. Talking about Lyle and Erik Menendez with Jeremy Rosenthal, attorney, TexasDefenseFirm.com. They're not denying those claims, although they certainly did initially. They're just saying they had to. They had no other recourse because of the years of sexual abuse they received at the hands of their father, Jose Menendez, and looking the other way, their mom, Kitty Menendez, never stood up for them either, apparently. They felt like this, or they say they felt like this was their only course of action to save themselves. And there has been new evidence presented that, and certainly evidence in their second trial in the early 90s was denied. They had a hung jury the first time where they were allowed to present this defense. Second trial they were not, which was right after the O.J. Simpson murder trial, where perhaps the prosecutor and the judge felt that they had been roughshod by lawyers in the O.J. Simpson case. So they didn't necessarily receive a fair trial the second time, able to present a full defense. Now we're learning that a letter existed with the Menendez brothers reinforcing these allegations about their father, and the evidence of a boy band Menudo member who was signed to RCA Records, managed by Jose Menendez, who claims he was also abused in the same way. That seems to corroborate their defense somewhat.
Right. I mean, what you're looking at is a battered spouse syndrome type defense, which it's hard to pull off. It really is. And some of the facts that really hurt the Menendez brothers back at the original trial or trials was, they're going out and buying Rolexes hours after this happens. That's a bad look, right? So they've got what's called a writ of habeas corpus. Their lawyer they're trying to reopen the whole thing to get a new trial based on the letter and because it really helps that the battered spouse syndrome defense. But again, if you're going to get what you want, if you're at home by Thanksgiving, you're at home by Thanksgiving, right? And I don't know that this was the function of a deal necessarily. I doubt that it was between Gascon and Mark Garagos, the Menendez attorney. But yeah, I don't know that we're ever going to see this case relitigated and retried. And really, you would, again, I mean, I think the prevailing thought is, look, 35 years was enough. And from everything you read and see, these guys were pretty exemplary inmates.
Which certainly should be taken into consideration by a parole board if they're given that by the judge, who I think politically is going to be under so much media pressure to refer them for the possibility of parole that's what we're going to see happen. How quickly can the legal system move? I mean, is it realistic to expect them to be home by Thanksgiving?
Their lawyer seems to think so. I think it's quite possible that can happen. I don't think you're looking at a very complicated hearing. I think everybody in this case knows all the facts, including the judge. I think that there's not a whole lot of reasons to have a full-blown hearing or retrial of this, so I think it could be done fairly quickly. The question then is the parole board going to kick them out quickly? And parole boards can work very efficiently, very quickly. One interesting quirk is that under this youthful offender statute is that the governor of California typically does not have to approve a youthful parole, which really helps the Menendez brothers. It's a rough law for offenders in California that the governor has to approve it because it makes everything political, and it's political suicide, if you will, for the governor to parole anybody where there is a whiff that the person is remotely dangerous. I mean, every ad by your opponent in the next election cycle is going to have that dude's face on it, right? So. Right. So they skip that part of it. They're going to be the parole board, and you would think that this is going to happen. Does it happen by Thanksgiving? I mean, we can take bets on that. That's the speed of government. I'm sure California is real great at this stuff, but yeah, maybe.
So, Jeremy, does this start a precedent for other decades-old cases to be revisited for the same reason now?
We're seeing a big trend of it, and a lot of it is in part to the true crime podcasts we watch, the Netflix documentaries that we see. America has an appetite for these stories, and I mean, look, if it puts the spotlight on situations where people get to do the right thing even well after the fact, I'm okay with it. But yeah, I think you're right. I do think that this sort of kind of helps the momentum of that trend.
But it does seem like the Menendez brothers, after 35 years in prison for killing their parents, have a good chance to be out this year. Jeremy Rosenthal, attorney, TexasDefenseFirm.com, here on the Scott Sancho. Jeremy, thanks for your insight.
Always, Scott. Have a good rest of your day.